The opinions and statements expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of WWDB, its staff, or management.
You are listening to In the Know with David O. Informative, substantive, intelligent talk radio on 860 AM WWDB. And now, your host, Philadelphia Councilman David O.
Good afternoon, and welcome to In the Know with David O. I'm Councilman David O. It's my pleasure to be here to speak to you, but more importantly, to bring you some really outstanding information from experts. Let me start by thanking Weinerman Pain and Wellness for sponsoring this show, the great job they do, ensuring that people who get injured are back at work, living full lives, both physically and emotionally. And to Philly Labor and all the advertisers of this show. If you remember last week, and I say this because you can hear this, if you go to our website, www.wwdbam.com. You can listen to past shows, but last week we had Ralph Galati, who was a POW during the Vietnam War, and ultimately is now Director of Veteran Services at St. Joseph's University. They have a wonderful free program for veterans who want to start a business. And it's about a year, great program. Larry Needle, PHL Sports. He's the executive director, and he was on talking about the NFL draft that happened in Philadelphia, how good it is for our city, and all the other things that help highlight Philadelphia, make it an exciting place, and also help our economy. And then finally, we had Davida Goddett, founder of Healthy Thoughts. It's a 501c3. She's a three-time survivor of stroke, and she hosts events. And so that was our show last week. And this week we have a outstanding show as well. And we will be hearing from two exceptional people. The first is Dr. Douglas Smith, MD. He's a director of the Center for Brain Injury and Repair, Department of Neurology at the University of Pennsylvania. And so, yes, we're going to be talking to a brain surgeon. We're going to be talking about some really difficult medical stuff, but don't worry. He is excellent at taking really complex, difficult topics and making them easy to understand. And then after that, we're going to talk to Alex Archawski. He's the founder and director of the Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network. What he does is help those who served our country transition from the military culture into the civilian world. And let's start with jobs. People in the military served our country, and, they're coming back to live amongst us here in the civilian side. And he helps them understand how to present themselves, how to find a job, that type of thing. And in addition to that, how to start a business. And so we'll be hearing from Alex Archawski. Right now, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Smith. He has quite a lengthy resume. So let me break it down simply by saying Dr. Smith is the director at the Penn Center for Brain Injury and Repair. He also sits on a number of different entities connected to health and to everything dealing with the brain. And we're going to hear from him right now. So let me welcome Dr. Smith to the show. Welcome to the show, Dr. Smith.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, fantastic. Now, could you just tell our audience, our listening audience, just a little bit about what you do at the University of Penn?
So we're really interested in not just how the brain is injured, but also how it might recover, and then even ways we might repair it, looking towards the future. We want to do this in a way that's multidisciplinary. So we have people who are very basic scientists working side by side with clinicians who take care of the patients, so that there's a continuity between this type of research. So it's a really kind of invigorated environment. It's the largest center, the most diverse in the world, and so we're pretty proud about it.
You have, I understand, about 25 principal investigators.
About 35.
35,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Because it's not just, that you see patients. It's that you're actually on the cutting edge of research and understanding how the brain works, how it's injured, and how it repairs itself.
That's right. I mean, if you ask most physicians who trained in medical school, even recently, what a concussion is, above their head is a thought bubble with nothing in it. They actually were never taught what a concussion is. They know the symptoms, but just describing symptoms is actually not a diagnosis. So we're trying to fill in that blank and put some words up in that thought bubble.
Okay, now let's break it down for our audience a little more, because while it's very clear to medical professionals the difference between a diagnosis and a conclusion,
An opinion, yeah.
An opinion.
Yeah.
Like, break that down for us some more. What does that exactly mean?
Well, so if you think about the word consumption, that used to be just kind of used, and people describe the symptoms. And so
Yes.
it's an opinion, yes, you have this consuming illness. When they discovered tuberculosis, that was the diagnosis. So they know what the underlying cause is. And that's where we are right now with things like concussion, that instead of just describing these vague symptoms, we're actually now describing to patients what's going on in their brain.
So back in the day, you're playing football, you get hit hard, and someone says, "Oh my goodness, you might have a concussion." You got to see a doctor. You go there and says, "Yes, you have a concussion." So you're saying that's not really the right way to do things.
Well, that's an opinion. I mean, what you really want to do is, it's not just do you have a concussion.
Right.
And it's, first off, it's not a rite of passage. People say, "Oh, you got your bell rung," it's all these kind of things. "Oh, you lined up on the wrong side of the field." But now we know that for some individuals, it's serious. Now, a lot of people are becoming a little bit like Chicken Little in describing a concussion as something so devastating that nobody can come back, and that simply does not appear to be true. The vast majority of concussions have a complete recovery, but there is about 20% of the patients we see, kids and adults, that have persisting symptoms. So those are the ones that we want to capture. So it's not just you have a concussion, but you have the type that's going to be difficult to recover from.
Now, injuries to the brain are far more commonplace than many people believe, and especially for people under the age of 45, which I guess makes sense when you start thinking about the fact that there's an active life, there's car accidents, there's other type of things. But why do we think sometimes, I don't know if you think this, I always kind of understood like these type of injuries are for older people.
Yeah, I think that certainly older people can fall and have a worse outcome just by virtue of being older. But there are kind of like two peaks. One is definitely younger, when young people are involved in sports, for example, and high-risk activities. I like to kind of joke that the number one genetic risk factor for having a concussion is the Y chromosome.
There we are, yes.
Males have that kind of risky behavior. But now with Title IX, there are a lot of young women entering different sports, different contact sports, and we discovered recently that they actually have a higher rate of concussion and a worse outcome than males participating in the same sport. So it's kind of an equal opportunity that we're all aware of. And,
right.
And what I think has really drawn people's attention to it is the fear of things like chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And
what is that?
Yeah, so it's a thing that people probably heard about for professional football players.
Right.
And they probably feel it's relatively new. There was a movie Concussion with a colleague of mine from Pittsburgh originally, Bennett Omalo, and discovering it in our heroic football players. But yeah, what people don't realize that we've known about this for decades. In fact, it was first described symptomatically in 1928.
So it's been
it's been around.
Yeah.
It's really not a surprise. It's the surprise for me is like why it took so long for people to kind of start to wake up to the fact that if you have repeated injuries to your head, some people, we don't know the numbers yet, some people go on to have a degenerative disease akin to kind of like Alzheimer's disease type changes in the brain. Again, we don't know those numbers. So what I'm pretty sure about is that one concussion, and for the vast majority of people, this is not the problem. It seems to be in a select group of people right now.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because basically, it used to be in my day, and maybe still today, someone's doing sports or something, they got, as you said, their bell rung, and it's kind of like, oh, you walk it off.
Yeah.
And but what you're saying is that these type of head injuries, head trauma, concussions, even things that people are like, oh, you could walk that off, it's not really a big deal, may be a big deal, and if you do it repetitively, it's not just that the injury happens and you're fine. There may be a continuous process of degeneration.
Yeah, so think about it this way. If you have a knee injury,
Yes.
you might limp for the rest of your life, but
Right.
you're still you.
Right.
But how much of you are you willing to put on the line for a game? So if you're really not back to where you should be, should you get back out and put your head at risk, for example?
Right.
So these are kind of like dinner table discussions that we have to have about, what kind of risk do you want to put your brain in? Would you want to put it in harm's way where it might get repeated injuries? Actually, a lot of football teams are having trouble to field enough players because there is awareness that hitting your head over and over is not
Right.
a good thing.
Let's jump to the military, because there's a whole nother level of people's understanding or perception about brain injuries related to explosive devices and other things, and you deal with that as well.
Yeah, so the what they call the signature injury of the recent conflicts is traumatic brain injury. That is going to be affecting vets in a much greater way than anything we've ever seen before. We've heard about Agent Orange,
Yes.
decades ago.
Yes.
That's nothing compared to what we're going to see with people with persisting complaints about traumatic brain injury symptoms. The overlap between that and post-traumatic stress disorder, where the two often go side by side, are actually kind of hard to distinguish one from the next. So this is something that we're going to have to look at for the VA population for decades and decades to come.
Yeah, and for our listeners, just as the doctor said, Agent Orange is pretty much a word that rings up Vietnam. IEDs, improvised explosive devices, is a kind of a signature thing for, the war right now in the Middle East. And just the impact of, even if you're not physically hit with anything, just the explosion itself can knock someone back, or can affect their brain when their brain hits the other side of their head.
Yeah, so it's actually I got to tell you, we've been somewhat unsuccessful to decipher what the injury is from blast exposure.
Okay.
So it turns out, much to the surprise of a lot of individuals, that most people with traumatic brain injury who are exposed to a blast hit their head on something, or something hit their head.
Right.
So it was kind of like the more conventional type of brain injury we might have anywhere. You fall down,
Right.
Somebody throws a ball and it hits you in the head. So it's not the blast shockwave that we thought was doing something so special to the brain that was unique from the more non-battle type of brain
Right.
injuries. That doesn't mean that blast exposure is not doing something, but we're still trying to figure out what that is.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's one of the things that's great about having you here, is I'm learning stuff every time I talk to you. Some of the things that you have looked at, by the way, is in addition to how a brain injury may continue to degenerate, you've also studied how the brain can heal itself, or how one day, I suppose, we might be able to help the brain heal.
Yeah, so the real problem with concussion and higher levels of traumatic brain injury is that it's your network that's damaged. And, you can have a focal injury. Some people, an older individual can have a stroke, and you see this gigantic area of the brain seems to have been lost. And they have disabilities for a while, but they go to rehab, and they're back out dancing, singing, and doing a lot of things they used to. And then you have these relatively, what appears to be an intact young person with a concussion or more higher level of injury. You don't see much changes on imaging. You say, why can't they get back? And that's because instead of just one small region of the brain, it's the network and the electric grid of the brain that's been damaged. And so it's kind of like you're having a persisting browning out of the city. So how do we get the lights back on? That's really understanding those mechanisms and maybe allowing them to, use that network in a different way than they had before.
Right. Now, I was reading about some of your research in terms of growing some part of the brain matter in your laboratory, and maybe one day we can transplant that to the brain. What's going on there?
Yeah, so there's a kind of weird thing is going on right now. A lot of people are kind of jumping ahead and want to put what I call brain paste to fill in voids in the head. And what I really mean is that somebody's taking some kind of cells and putting them into the brain someplace. But the brain is super organized. It has all these pathways, these nerve fibers that connect one part of the brain to the other. It took evolution to design that. It took development, the person growing up, to kind of create that very, very pristine structure. And so simply throwing in some kind of paste, I'm not sure what that would do. So, just if you want to be rational, you say, well, we have to kind of replace the anatomy that was taken away. So if you've lost a pathway, you should replace that with a repair pathway that will then fill in the place. Think of like jumper cables or kind of extension cord of sorts, so that you can wire in living nervous tissue in the regions that were damaged.
Is that the transplant that I was talking about that I read, or is that the brain paste? Which one is it?
No, that would be the transplant. We actually engineered nervous tissue as opposed to a bunch of cells. The paste, I would say, are just a bunch of cells, and somebody stands back and has this little Shazam wand and hopes something will happen, versus engineering something that looks like the part of the brain that was damaged.
Right. Are we on the edge, or will it be like decades later where we might be able to transplant that pathway into or onto someone's brain?
Well, I'm really hoping that we can transition this very quickly. So we've gotten the technology to the point where we're hoping to first use it to repair peripheral nerves that have been damaged. Where people can have if you can damage an arm up high, the arm looks intact, but without the nervous system driving it, the arm has no function. So if we can reconnect the nervous system to that arm, it's the same type of technology. We're using kind of a jumper cable approach, or creating a pathway for the signals to get back down the arm. So that would be our first step. So if that technology works for repairing the peripheral nervous system, like in limbs, especially the arms, then we could take that same technology and apply it to the brain.
Interesting. Now, could you answer this question? I recall from your testimony, and for those listening, Dr. Smith was so kind to come over to a hearing we had about PTSD versus traumatic brain injury, TBI, related to veterans and veterans health care. But, there was a conversation, or at least testimony, where you talked about the sudden stretching of the brain and how that creates injuries, lesions, tears. But then I was reading that possibly like slow stretching might actually help recover the brain. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so you have good stretch. So you have kids. You told me you have 4 kids, right?
I do, yes.
So when they're little, if you have them, like you say, touch your nose, touch your ear, and then reach over your head and touch your other ear, and their little tiny Tyrannosaurus Rex arms won't reach.
Right, yes.
But as the arms grow, these nerves will grow with it. So that's a good stretch of the nervous tissue. So that's creating longer nervous tissue. Due to mechanical reasons. But it's slow, and so it works. That's contrasted very much with the brain when it's injured. So your brain is kind of like, I often use the example, we're on the radio, but I think most people know silly putty. If you play with it and you make a cylinder and you stretch it apart longer and longer, it just keeps stretching thinner and thinner. That'd be a slow stretch. I think that'd be kind of akin to if you bend your elbow, those nerves can tolerate a very large stretch as the elbow's bending. But if you take the same cylinder of silly putty and you stretch it really quickly, it will break.
Yes.
It acts stiffer when you have a very fast mechanical distraction to it. And that's how your brain is. It's a very fancy term called viscoelasticity. Your brain is kind of more jelly during the day, but if normal daily activities, but under the very rapid movements, like when your head hits something, collides with a car windshield or something, that very rapid movement makes the brain behave stiffer, and you can physically break internal structures of cells, like the nerve fibers can have components of them that break.
And they sometimes repair themselves, or they don't ever repair themselves?
I think in most cases they do repair themselves.
Right.
I think you probably can see it. You witness it with people with concussions for a few days. They might be a little bit out of it, but bit by bit they seem to get it all back together. But for those individuals who have really longer-term persisting issues, we're worried that some of these nerve fibers may be degenerated. That means they disappeared. And you can't regrow these.
Right.
If they're gone forever. And so you would, in that case, have to, use the rest of your brain to help compensate for your function.
Right. And at that point in time, if a pathway is damaged, it would be then the opportunity possibly to transplant that pathway back into the brain.
That's right. We have to discover how the brain repairs naturally to kind of, reroute around a damaged region. Much the same way as if somebody working on an electric grid in the city has to figure out how to, get around that buzzy wire section or the transformer blue. It's really kind of the same thing, that we have to stay away from the areas of the brain that might be corrupting the network signal, and just find a way so that that normal pathway or a pristine pathway can be reestablished.
In another conversation, a completely different topic about actually recovering from drug addiction and the damage that's caused to the brain from long-term drug use, I was talking to someone, and they were talking about some research from Harvard that indicated that exercise and physical activity was helpful in generating repairs to the brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we're actually at a weird transition right now. So if you have a concussion and you go to a rehab center, up until just recently, they did something called cocooning, something they did in the military. They've done in sports clinics,
yes,
where they try to put you in a dark place and just insist that you stay away from like any kind of screens with lights on them. And yet, with the more severe traumatic brain injuries, the idea is to get them up and show improvement. Much the way somebody gets a new hip, you want to get them up and moving, and be active. Well, now things have shifted the other way for a concussion. So, if you're not feeling well, certainly you're not supposed to be pushed. But they do want to have what's called active rehab now. So you actually get people exercising, and that exercise helps to stimulate the brain and may help recovery.
Uh-oh, sounds like walk it off his back.
Well, not right afterwards.
Yeah, okay, but I got the point that people are very concerned when someone is like knocked unconscious or they're knocked silly, and you want to close your eyes, don't look at bright lights flash. It might stimulate
I think right now, things can shift again, but right now, definitely if the person doesn't like the bright lights, take them away.
Right.
And don't do something that they do, which is a kind of a funny holdover from a long time ago, is that keep them awake. And if you ask them why, I say, well, I don't know.
Right.
But that's actually kind of sadly, Natasha Richardson died from a bleed. So there are a few individuals where they hit their heads, and you can have a bleed that just keeps piling up, and it squashes your brain so that you don't get blood to your brain. And you can die. So this is why before they had imaging and more clinical assessments that they would have people try to stay awake. But those days are long gone. If somebody wants to sleep, let them sleep.
Right. Okay. Well, I was just looking at this paragraph here. Each year, an estimated 2 million Americans suffer from some form of traumatic brain injury, and even more alarming, it's the leading cause of death and disability in persons under 45 years of age, occurring more frequently than breast cancer, AIDS, multiple sclerosis, and spinal cord injury combined.
Yeah, it's something that's while people have become more aware of it, it still remains somewhat of a silent epidemic. So we were also very interested in spinal cord injuries, so we were pretty aware of the statistics. And for traumatic brain injury, it's probably because of the reporting keeps increasing. It looks like we're having more and more brain injuries. But I bet in the U.S. it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 million a year.
Right.
And if I'm teaching a course of students, I say, do you think that kind of is the same as spinal cord injury? And most students say, yeah, I think so. But spinal cord injury is less than 10,000 people a year. So we're talking orders of magnitude different. That's the perception of traumatic brain injury. And it's invisible. So somebody might look like the normal person outside, whereas somebody with a spinal cord injury or other types of diseases or injuries, you just see it. They're in a wheelchair. They're, have bandages. They have something. Whereas the brain is this kind of invisible structure, hidden by the skull and the skin. And yet somebody's walking around not being who they used to be.
Before we go on, let me just ask you that in terms of our listeners, if they are are now thinking about someone they know or about themselves, and they want to get some type of treatment or diagnosis, or is there a website or a phone number or some place that they could contact someone in terms of answering their needs?
Well, I would like to say yes globally, and I would say that they absolutely should pursue this, but we are suffering something that I just don't understand right now. We have to change is what I call discontinuity of care. There's a couple of things. So one, you could talk to your primary care physician, and he or she may not know where to refer you to, and maybe just have some general neurology tests. And so the medical community has to be educated about referrals.
Right.
And then on top of that, we have a huge number of patients who are extremely frustrated to be shown the door before they feel like they're better. And that could be because insurance isn't paying for it, or because the rehab center, if that's where they went, the patient has gotten so good, so much better, that that's the limit of the skill level, or really the focus of that rehab center. And so they're done there. But the patient themselves feels that they have a lot of work to be done. So we have to have better continuity of care. We have to develop a better, we call evidence-based practice, to be sure these rehab strategies are truly working for the patient and not just kind of an exercise making us all feel better. And
right. Can they call University of Penn, for example?
That absolutely they should. I think that we have great facilities and we're aware of this discontinuity, and so there is more of a referral system. And this is something I hope will change in the next few years, that people will be alerted to the fact of a list of who they should refer these patients to. Okay,
that sounds very very serious, and but the fact is that there is a place for people to go to in terms of trying to find the expertise that is necessary to address the injury that people are trying to deal with. I say this because I have a friend, and he had numerous concussions during his time of service in the military, and just where he lives, he's not in Philadelphia, he did not find, I think, the level of care that you were talking about, either from the primary physician or through the VA network where he is, and ultimately 16 years have gone by and he has not been treated. He's finally, hopefully, being treated now here in Philadelphia. But the traumatic brain injury that he suffers from has altered him as a person, and he knows it. He is has some issues, and he is cognizant of the fact that he is not him, and so I think it is so important that people get on the right track with the right type of medical help.
Yeah, and I would just to not necessarily to advertise, but every midwinter, February or March, we have a symposium, Mind Your Brain, so that patients and their caregivers can come and hear about the latest research, hear about providers. It's free that we have at Penn, so if people look for that. Part of that is to help people like your friend who has a persisting injury. Many people in medical school have been taught that you, after 2 years, wherever you are, that's where you're going to stay. And we know that's not true, that there is an opportunity to recover far beyond that time point. We just have to get our tools a little bit better and the referral system a little bit better.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. I'm speaking with Dr. Douglas Smith, MD, Director, Center for Brain Injury and Repair, Department of Neurology at the University of Pennsylvania, and so many other things. We were just before the show talking about the fact that, we just had the NFL draft, but he sits on the NFL, what is it?
Scientific Advisory Board.
Yeah.
Unpaid.
Unpaid, but one of many things that he does. So stay tuned. We're then going to be joined by Alex Archawski from the Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network right after this commercial break.
You are listening to In the Know with David O. Informative, substantive, intelligent talk radio on 860 AM WWDB.
My friends, this is Joe Kraus. You've heard me on Philadelphia radio now for over 20 years, and you know I don't often endorse products or people unless they are real game changers. I want to tell you about Weinerman Pain and Wellness, located in Center City, Philadelphia. And at the end of this short personal endorsement, I want you to consider Weinerman Pain and Wellness. If you are recovering from an injury, If you or a family member has been diagnosed with a disorder that has stopped you in your tracks, or if you're like me, determined to learn about wellness while getting yourself prepared to stay healthy so you can enjoy the blessings of your family. Remember the name of this warm and caring location, Weinerman Pain and Wellness. Why should you consider Weinerman Pain and Wellness? Because they are who you expect them to be. Weinerman Pain and Wellness, on the web at WeinermanPainandWellness.com.
Weinerman Pain and Wellness, located at 100 South Broad Street, just south of City Hall. Call Weinerman Pain and Wellness at 215-988-9503. That's 215-988-9503. Call today. Today's broadcast is brought to you by the Philly Labor RX Injured Workers Pharmacy Network, featuring PPC Pharmacy, First Choice Pharmacy, and Precision Scripts, providing injured workers with premium products and services from the point of injury through the entire healing process. The Philly Labor RX Pharmacy Network cares about injured workers.
Every day, the men and women of the United States Marine Corps demonstrate their commitment to defend the American way of life. Since 1775, we have served our nation as a force in readiness. From combat operations to humanitarian assistance in every corner of the world. No matter where the mission takes us today or wherever our country needs us tomorrow, we always remember the land we call home. As Marines, we take a stand for each other, for our nation, for us all. The few, the proud, the Marines.
All right. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. Let me just alert you that if you have time this evening, 6:30 to 8:30, I'll be co-hosting a district attorney candidates forum. That's for Philadelphia at Saigon Maxim Restaurant, 612 Washington Avenue in Philadelphia. We'll have our district attorney candidates and some of our judges stop by. But basically, this is co-hosted with Philly Neighborhood Small Business Council, and it really focuses on small businesses and the need of small business owners and the small business community. Well, now let me introduce Alex Archawski. He is the founder and director of the Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network. Alex himself is a former search and rescue swimmer with the Navy and Operation Enduring Freedom veteran. He served in the Middle East and twice transitioned from military service, both active duty and reserve, to the civilian world. And he has mentored other veterans, helping them to develop and execute their job searching plan, network strategy, and also helped veterans with their desire to start and own a business. The Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network is a nonprofit organization, and it does such great work with so many good people helping out. Today, it has a commitment with over 1,500 volunteers, mentors, committees, advisory folks, and local businesses and community leaders. They help veterans find jobs, they help veterans start businesses, and they help employers connect to those very capable workers and leaders who are veterans. And so let me welcome Alex Archawski to the show.
Thanks, Councilman. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for being here. And, it's interesting because we were talking to Dr. Doug Smith about TBI, which is a term well known to those who serve in the military as a result of what's happening in the Middle East these days. But you, in a way, deal with all of these things when people in active duty want to transition back into the civilian side of things, or some of them actually really haven't been in the civilian side of things. They have a career in the military, and now they're here looking for a job. How did you get involved in this in the first place?
Well, it's I've unfortunately been blessed to transition twice. So that's the term I always use because of the fact that first time active duty overseas before 9/11, living overseas, coming back, it's kind of like being on permanent work vacation where you're working overseas for 3 years and you come back and you have to get used to different lifestyle, right? So that was the first time I went through that process, saw how difficult that was.
What was difficult about it for you personally?
I think I was more upset of how long it took me. And I think what happens is I took mental note of that could have been quicker.
Right.
And I think everybody will say that. If I only knew. It's a famous line veterans say to each other after they're out, after they're into their job, they're happily married with kids, and then they reflect back, goes, you know what, if I only knew, ... And that's the famous line.
Now, let me interrupt you. For our listeners, they may not know exactly what you're talking about. So we have a large population these days that have had, like, no military service. And so could you describe for them when you say that could have been done a lot faster, what exactly happens? Why isn't it done faster? What don't people know when they get out of the military?
So that's a good question, and I'll add that to why I created the organization as well. So created the organization was transition out of the service into civilian life, into work. And then I was in the reserves. I decided to do it part-time, boat unit out of Annapolis, enjoyed myself. And then after 9/11, we were recalled back to active duty pretty much 2 months after 9/11. The unfortunate circumstance where my employer let me go right before deployment, which was legal. But when I had to put my stuff in storage, all my stuff I built up from my apartment, proposed to my wife, went overseas to the Middle East as a reserve unit, which is unknown at that time, and then just stayed out there and came back a year later. I had to look for another job again. And those circumstances were probably a little bit different. I always say this, if you relate it to the Army, what I did in the Navy was being in the Humvee in the water.
Okay, all right.
So basically with the way that we did things. But what happened was I had to look for a job again, but I took a little slower this time because I didn't trust an employer.
Okay.
And I realized that over time when somebody, a good mentor of mine, saying, would you hire yourself? And I said, I don't know. He goes, well, hold up a mirror. And he goes, you don't trust anybody and you don't really have a good attitude.
Right.
And I said, well, no, I wouldn't hire me. And he says, well, welcome to your job search.
Right.
And I took pretty good note of that. And I was like, wow, I'm hoping it's just me. But what I realized is I really needed to get the ball in motion. And I worked hard and followed a diligent plan, work ethic, and whatever that was, structure. And I'll use that word a couple times because the biggest challenge when you get out of the service that we see in service members is the structure. So basically, if you think about military service members, you're told when to wake up, you're told when to go to bed, you're told when to eat, you're told when to get the helo, and you're told when to fire the weapon.
Right.
So I know you're laughing with me because in essence, we typically don't have a choice. But when we get out, as smart as we are, academies, enlisted, our DNA is such that we are waiting for the orders. So we might hear them, job fair or this, go chase that. So we're doing tactics, but no structure. So what happens is it can be a long time if we don't have the game plan in action. So that's what I realized over time after viewing this. I said, well, first of all, where are all the vets? I said, if we're going to come back to the community, they're disfragmented. There's a legion here, there's a post here. I said, we have to create the largest network of veterans per industry. And we have to build that so when people come out, we have to really show them the network so they can find their information.
So now the Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network, or GPVN, has been around since 2010. So that's basically 7 years, right?
It's been 7 years, and I was really mindful and careful. There's some really good help out there.
Yes.
That for our service members. But one thing that I realized on the culture of help that I said that needed to be done, which a lot of the military families like, and a lot of the moms of service members like, is we need to be treated like family, which means our organization is more of an accountability and a kick in the rear. So if you think about nonprofits, it's typically sometimes a little bit too many hugs and counseling.
Right.
We hear the word counseling a lot. Well, a job search is economics.
Right.
And economics is business. So you have to have business conversations and business acumen and skills. So we got to do a little bit of a different culture and social process for them to understand that.
Now, could you explain to the audience the three main things that you do, and that is jobs and, of course, the employment opportunity, both for the veteran and the employer, both sides of that coin, and then starting businesses, entrepreneurship for veterans.
Absolutely. So one of the things that came immediately afterwards was, if you can't just help the veterans when they get out, there's the life cycle of the vet, which means when they're going to get employed, how's the retention? How's their growth? Right. So we decided we're going to do three different buckets, which is employment, leadership, and then entrepreneurship. So the news makes it seem like everybody's getting into entrepreneurship out of the military, but there might be perfect examples. West Point grad that is 20 years at Pfizer, and all of a sudden he wants to create his own business, and he's living in Collegeville, for example. So that's entrepreneurship for veterans as well. So we said we're going to build the best ecosystem and make Philadelphia one of the best destinations for vets. And along the way, we have to have these employers there with us to make sure that they understand what they're hiring. And one of the biggest gaps that we found is that not the value of hiring a veteran is the stage before. What is the DNA of a transitioning veteran? Right. What does it mean to the region? Mm-hmm. So again, they might have a major footprint in Philadelphia and they might be national, but there's, if you don't mind, I'll share with you kind of the five different buckets, which are truly important. So we break it down to them to say, what are the reasons why service members serve? Patriotism, poor neighborhoods, broken families, tuition, college tuition, traveling the world adventure. Those are the top five. Right. Not saying that there's any specific orders, but there's poor towns out there. There's at the end, and gives them an opportunity. Some people might have not the opportunity in their lives with their families. This might be a way out. Some people, because of patriotism in their family. How does that mean for the region that they're hiring? They have to understand also the DNA of that veteran, where they're coming back to. And to understand Philadelphia has become a little bit more white collar than blue collar because of the GI Bill. Right.
And so for our listeners, can you kind of tell us what's unique about the Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network as opposed to a lot of the other great services that are around here? But what does your organization do and do well?
Well, I think what it is it depends on how people want to be challenged for their success. Right. So we're there. Our taglines are tools, your mission. There's a reason behind that. Right. So we're there to support you, to provide you the introductions, to provide you the whereabouts, to provide you the tickets for networking, to provide you all the tools necessary. But if you're not using them, if they're not using them, then we will not be the infrastructure to do the follow-ups. So we will want to make sure that everybody succeeds. If they need a little bit more services like the VA offers because of mental health, or the confidence is not there, that we want to make sure to take a step back. But in the end, just like we look at employers, we don't try to sell it to them to hire veterans. Right. Our job is to say, what would you like to do and how can we help? Because if we try to sell it to employers, what happens is they nod, they agree, but it takes forever for them to do anything. However, if employers are looking and they're active, that means they're on to something and they just want to do it right.
Right. Some of the things that I know personally that you do and GPVN, for example, Shark Tank. There's a veteran Shark Tank with all the benefits that a Shark Tank brings. It's for veterans. I have been to events where some of our largest employers in the region get together and basically get schooled in how to reach veterans, how to hire veterans, the benefits of veterans, and then we have I've been to some of your events where you have junior officers, senior officers, a whole variety of different folks from the military, just hearing about the job search, some of the culture and ethos, that they have to go through this transition in understanding how to talk to employers and land that job.
Well, for example, we're flipping the help on its head. If you look at anybody that's offers career services or anything, there's a new era called experiential learning. Experiential learning is basically field exercise and then the classroom. Nobody wants to go into the classrooms anymore. So we're doing programs that are really flipped on its head, like one of our ones that is growing. It's called the Speed Interviewing Networking for Student Veterans. So what happens is there's a bunch of employers around a U-shaped table, all the major logos and small to medium-sized companies. They don't have a table throw. They don't have a name tag. And then we bring in veterans in there. And I think you attended the kickoff one we had last year.
Yeah, I sure did.
They have to, in 3 minutes, to pitch themselves. So if you think about what the veterans need to practice more of, it is just a rush of exercise that they need to do to feel comfortable. So when I talked about my experience, if it took too long, our job is to shorten the personal branding,
right,
getting in front of the right people, too, at the same time, and for them to say, a majority of them saying, I get it. And some people learn how to ride a bike a little bit differently. And then where do they want to focus and how do we help them target and focus? The major challenge that we addressed again, we were in creation is I saw career objective as not being addressed. So people are logo shopping for employers, which you can't do.
Yes.
So you can't say I want to work at that company because they're like, which job? So they're not being taught that. It's difficult to put that back on the base. It's just hard enough for them to transition out of the military with their family, with themselves. They have to come home first before doing that. So what we do is, because we help them understand how to define their career objective. So we say, do you want to be in sales, marketing, underwriting, real estate, finance? And we break it down of what that means. Simple things as working alone, working as a team, working as a group on a project, small company, medium company, big company. So what happens is, if you think about veterans in transition and why we exist, 50% of veterans from 9/11 leave their first job. And that's huge. Yes. So the reason why we're in existence is get it right the first time or close to right.
Yes.
Maybe it's not the right company. So if you look at our population, people will switch jobs, but at least they knew the right type of job.
Yes.
The second part is, how do you build your own skills if you don't have your teammates from the Army and the military to help you learn the culture of moving up the chain of command? Because it's not every 2 years you get promoted like the military.
Right.
It is about how do you shake hands, how do you talk internally and externally.
Okay, well, listen, we're going to take a break. I hope everyone stays tuned, because when we come back, Alex Archawski is going to give out the contact information and other things that you need to get in touch if you're a veteran or know someone who's a veteran who wants to get in on some of these programs.
You are listening to In the Know with David O. Informative, substantive, intelligent talk radio on 860 AM WWDB.
My friends, this is Joe Krause. You've heard me on Philadelphia radio now for over 20 years, and you know I don't often endorse products or people unless they are real game changers. I want to tell you about Weinerman Pain and Wellness, located in Center City, Philadelphia. And at the end of this short personal endorsement, I want you to consider Weinerman Pain and Wellness. If you are recovering from an injury, if you or a family member has been diagnosed with a disorder that has stopped you in your tracks, or if you're like me, determined to learn about wellness while getting yourself prepared to stay healthy so you can enjoy the blessings of your family, Remember the name of this warm and caring location, Weinerman Pain and Wellness. Why should you consider Weinerman Pain and Wellness? Because they are who you expect them to be. Weinerman Pain and Wellness, on the web at WeinermanPainandWellness.com.
Weinerman Pain and Wellness, located at 100 South Broad Street, just south of City Hall. Call Weinerman Pain and Wellness at 215-988-9503. That's 215-988-9503. Call today. Today's broadcast is brought to you by the Philly Labor RX Injured Workers Pharmacy Network, featuring PPC Pharmacy, First Choice Pharmacy, and Precision Scripts, providing injured workers with premium products and services from the point of injury through the entire healing process. The Philly Labor RX Pharmacy Network cares about injured workers.
At any given moment, somewhere in America, a baby is taking a first step, a developmental milestone. But for too many parents, a baby's first steps aren't just a milestone. They're a miracle. These are the parents of babies who were born prematurely or with birth defects. It's a crisis affecting more than 500,000 babies in the United States each year. You can help them by joining volunteers like you who walk in March for Babies. The money you raise funds research and local programs that help babies overcome the challenges of premature birth and birth defects. Together, our steps make stronger, healthier babies a reality for thousands of families. Sign up today at marchforbabies.org to take the steps that help make milestones and even miracles possible. Who will you march for?
Introducing the YMCA. What, you already know the why? Or so you think. Sure, you know the why for a swim, a workout, even a game of hoops. But did you know we're more than that? We're a cause. When you take your jump shot at the Y, someone else is getting job training. Take a cardio class, while kids are in an after-school enrichment program. Practice your downward-facing dog as a teen practices her leadership skills. That's the why. We work with people no matter their age, income, or background and give them the opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive, all with one simple goal in mind, to strengthen our community. And we've got so much more that does just that. So while you might think of the Y as that place for lifting weights, we're also about lifting entire communities. Introducing the Y. We're so much more than a place. We're a cause. Visit ymca.net/more.
All right, and you are back, WWDB 860 AM, In the Know with David O. Right now we're talking to Alex Archawski. He's a former search and rescue swimmer, served active duty and in the reserves, which basically called to active duty in the reserves. And so one of the things that happens is he has to return to the civilian world, and he has taken that experience and created an organization. 7 years it has existed, the Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network, and it serves to help active duty military who may not have actually had experience in the civilian side of things get a job. It helps employers learn how to hire and retain veterans, and it helps veterans who want to start and own their own business in so many different ways. But right now I'm going to ask Alex to give out the contact information for his organization.
Sure. So we can be found on various channels. Our website just has our information, www.gpvn.org. So it's Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network, the first letter of each word. And also we have a thriving LinkedIn group of over 1,600 people, Facebook and Twitter as well.
Fantastic. And you have an event coming up, and we were just talking about Shark Tank a little bit ago, but do you have an event coming up about Shark Tank?
We do. We have our signature event each year is our Shark Tank, which this year is Monday, December 4th at the Union League. We're proud and honored to have Comcast NBC Universal as our sponsor again.
Wow, great.
And we are going to be making this a national event to highlight Philadelphia.
All right.
So what that means is our candidate pool is going to be outside Philadelphia. We had some great minds last year, but we're going to be highlighting Philly on why this city's the best for vets during that event.
Okay.
Our Sharks have been tremendous before. They've hurt everybody's feelings.
Yes,
okay. And it's a little bit of, so what we did is we decided saying, you know what are we going to do for an event? We want people in there to be inspired, and also our job is to market the success of vets.
Yes.
So with all the news that's out there, our organization has spun over the years into an organization that markets the success of individuals to fight every single news that is out there.
Right. And why is that important, Alex?
I think first impression is a lasting impression. So if you remember years ago when they said there were sharks attacks in Florida, every single shark was in Florida, right?
Right.
But in reality, it was just 5 sharks probably floating around Cocoa Beach.
Right.
So when anybody hears news about veterans, our job is to look at the employer straight in the eyes and goes, it's up to you of what you want to determine. Right. It's because we need to care for our veterans that need care, but the news is basically based on that. So our job is to get more just like this, which we appreciate, talk about the success of all the veterans that are working right now and how they're becoming great leaders, and they're hiring more veterans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just a great resource. Thanks for serving our country. But all the skills, experience, cool-headedness, and all the wonderful things that veterans bring to employers. And now you have really got some great employers that have stepped up to work with GPVN.
We've been fortunate enough to have nobody's run away from us with our dialogue. So what we are is when they want information, we ask them, are they ready for information? And when they do, we invite them to our programs, which you've seen, which is the How to Hire Veterans Roundtables. So we break it down by how to hire wounded warriors, from healing to employment, how to hire senior military, which I want to emphasize a little bit more in a couple minutes, how to hire Guard and Reserve, which was an eye-opener for many people last year.
Yes.
Is Pennsylvania is very heavy in the Guard, and the majority of the people do not know about that.
Yes. Okay. So you were talking about senior military in our last minute. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. If you think about all the employers out there, by default they do hourly and entry level.
Yes.
It's nothing. So what we're doing is we're challenging them to hire mid and senior level military and training them that way.
Okay, fantastic. Now, listen, everybody, if you're a veteran or if you know a veteran or someone who's coming off of active duty, Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network, you could look them up on Google. If you can't, just go to www.gpvn.org. And they just have a wealth of programs. They are veterans, they are concerned, and they are helping to ensure that our region has the best possible employees and leaders. Tune in next week.
You've been listening to In the Know with David O on 860 AM WWDB. Tune in again next Tuesday at 2 p.m. for more informative, substantive, intelligent talk radio with Philadelphia Councilman David O.